Hello everyone, welcome back. In my last video, we have implemented the create operation in our unmanaged application. But when we reviewed our application, that time we were not able to create the new travel entity because we just implemented the create method. We didn't implement the save sequence. The create method only save the data in the transactional buffer. From the transactional buffer, the data should be picked up and it should be saved during the save sequence in the database. So first we will understand what all are the methods will trigger during the save sequence, and we will implement those methods and see still the create travel is working or not for unmanaged scenario. During the create operation, we have saved the data in the transactional buffer. Means we have saved the data in the internal table called the empty buffer. But from there, we have to pick up the data and the save in the database. That we will do in the save sequence runtime. The save sequence runtime will trigger as soon as you finish the create operation. All the create method got triggered. What is the sequence of the create method, that also we will see. But before that, we want to implement our save sequence as well. We want to save the data in the database. The save sequence work, you want to save the data in the database. You will take the data from the transactional buffer and save the data in the database. In the save sequence, the first method will trigger, that is called the finalize. What is the use of the finalize method? This method will be the last chance for you. You can modify your transactional buffer data using the EML statement. After this method, you will be not able to use any kind of EML statement, entity manipulation language statement, in your save sequence. Here what you will do, if you want to implement some logic, for example, you have some of the fields already filled by the front end. Now some of the other fields you want to fill based on some other logic. You want to do the determinations, for example, total price. We want to do the determinations. Those kind of things you will write in unmanaged scenario in this method finalize. You will write all the code in the method finalize. But in managed scenario, that thing you will do in the determinations. So we did in the determination to determine the total price, and we wrote the code in the determination that got triggered here. But in unmanaged scenario, you will write those kind of thing in the method finalize. After this, that is the most important thing. You will be not able to use any EML statement to modify your transactional buffer. This is the last chance to make sure whatever you want to do modification you can do here. And in managed BO also we are having the managed finalize, but that is done by the runtime, or we can say that is done by the framework. We don't need to worry. But in unmanaged scenario, if you want to do something, you want to finalize something, that you have to do here. And determination in managed scenario used to do these kind of things. Whatever you want to add some new values in existing field, or we want to modify some existing values based on the other values. So those things we want to do. Basically, whatever you want to do modification on the transactional buffer, you will do in the method finalize in unmanaged scenario. In managed scenario, you will do in the determination. After this, if either it will be passed or failed. If it is failed, then it will call directly cleanup method that we will discuss. But if it got pass, if something I missed, I don't think so, but if it will pass, then it will go to the next step called the check before save. The next method will be called in save sequence is the check before save. Here you want to make sure your BO is consistent. Consistent means if there is something issue in your data, then you have to find out, you have to check each and every field, everything should be okay, then only you will move further from here. If something goes wrong, then again you have to give the error message, there is something wrong, and you have to do the cleanup activity, and you have to go back to the transactional interaction phase. But this is the last chance to go to the interaction phase. After this, you will be not able to return to the interaction phase. That is the reason we will do in unmanaged scenario, we will call the check before save, and in managed scenario, check before save done by the runtime. And if you want to do additional validation, that we will write in the validation step, the method for validation for the managed scenario. So this is done in the managed scenario. In unmanaged scenario, validation, if you want to write something, that we will write in the check before save. We are doing the validation in during the create operation also, because we are using the API function module. It is doing everything for us, so we no need to write any additional code in the check before save. Those checks, those fields check the fields values are correct or not, date is correct or not, that we are doing during create itself. We have already checked in the creation phase itself, so we no need to write additional code in the check before save. It might be in your case, before going to further step, you want to do some other validation as well, that you have to write in this method check before save. In managed scenario, that validations we will do in the validation. We will define the validation in the behavior definition, and then we will write the code in the validation method, and the other validation done by the managed scenario, managed framework. After this red line will come. After this point of the red line, you will be not able to return to the transactional phase. That is the very important thing. Whatever you did, first step you modify the BO, second step you validated the BO, and after this you have to hand over the data to the finally the user will be not able to have again interaction phase. So that whatever interaction you want to do, that is completed, and you have make sure that your BO is consistent during this check before save. Now the next step will trigger. The next step will be the adjust number. This is the important thing for our implementation also, because we have defined the late numbering. So late numbering we will do in the adjust number. After the point of no return only, we can do the adjust number, late numbering. Late numbering means you want that the number which we assign to the primary key field, that is gap free, that should not be having any gap. That is when it is possible, when once you assign that number, you will not able to return to the transactional phase. So that is the reason that adjust number method is called after the point of no return. That is possible for the managed scenario also or unmanaged scenario also. In managed scenario also you can define the late numbering. In unmanaged scenario also you can define the late numbering. In managed scenario we did early numbering. In unmanaged scenario we are doing the late numbering. So here we have to define our final travel ID key field. Finally we have to decide. Before that, whatever we have derived the key field, that is internal one during the transactional phase. Now whatever we assign here, that will be saved in the database. So whatever we want to assign the primary key field, finally that we will do here. Adjust number, today we will implement this method as well. After assigning this primary key field, we will go to the last step called the save. Once everything is done, now I want to save the data in the database. In unmanaged scenario, there is the only one method called the method save. It will suggest the data, whatever the data is available in the transactional buffer, it will save the data in the database. Because we have already made sure everything is okay, it will be saved successfully. Because we have, if something you are thinking that it can error out, you will get dump only. You can't return any error message in the late save sequence. After the no point of return, you can't return any error message. You will be not having that failed parameter in these methods, save method or adjust number. You can only return reported, where reported messages only. So there, if you are thinking there's due to some reason it is got failing, that you have to check before save. In check before save only method only, you have to check those things and you have to come here. That is the one of the most important thing you have to make sure. This is related to the unmanaged. In managed save, the save is done by the framework, and if you want to do the additional save, or you want to do in managed scenario unmanaged save, then you have to write that code in the save modified method that we did in my previous videos. Now we will use this method save because we are using the unmanaged scenario to save our data. Once this method is triggered, then the commit work by the framework will be triggered. After the commit work, data is saved in the database. Now you want to do the cleanup. Cleanup means you have some data in the transactional buffer you want to clean up because everything is done. Now you want to clean up those data which is available in your transactional buffer to start the new LUW. So for that, this cleanup will trigger, and cleanup will clear this particular transactional buffer. It will trigger at the end of the save sequence, or during the transactional buffer you are calling some BO modify statement from the other BO or some other program. That time you did rollback, that time also this cleanup method will trigger. So the rollback entities statement you return, that time also this cleanup method will trigger. In the cleanup method you will clear your transactional buffer data. In our case we have the buffer table empty underscore buffer, those we will clear in the cleanup method. So method cleanup will be called, and in many scenarios the cleanup done by the framework, so no need to worry. After that we have successfully saved the data and the operation is performed successfully. But during the check before save and finalize, if it got failed, and it will come to directly this method which is called the cleanup finalize. During the check before save or during the finalize method, if something goes wrong, so this arrow will come. Still sometime we want to clear the transactional buffer because something goes wrong in the finalize and the check before save method, then those kind of cleanup we can do in this cleanup finalize method, and then it will be save will be failed and the interaction is returned to the user. Now user can again interact with the screens and do the modification accordingly, and again it will save the data. Like that it will happen. So these are the mainly 5 methods I can say. So what first will be the finalize, where we finalize our business object and we finally modify the transactional buffer. Second, check before save, we will check all the data, adjust number, we will define the late numbering, or we will define our key field finally, which is the gap free, and finally save method, and then cleanup methods. So once these things are done, then this is our save sequence. So in our case we have to implement, one is the adjust number because we have defined the late numbering. Second, we have to do the cleanup also. We will do the cleanup. In our case we didn't define the finalize and the check before save, so no need to write any code in the cleanup finalize. And cleanup we have to define, we have to clear the transactional buffer data. Those 3 methods we will implement and we will see. So let's jump into the system. We will implement these 3 methods and see our create is working or not. Now to implement the save sequence, we already have defined our save sequence class ZBP I travel take you, and we have defined the behavior pool classes ZBP travel take you for the interaction phase and ZBP booking take you for the interaction phase. When we automatically generated these classes, then the name came I underscores. So I underscore, why it came? Because we are implementing this particular behavior pool for the interface level, means not on the projection level. So if you create some classes on projection level, then the naming convention either it should be P or C. I didn't create it yet, but I have removed I from here, but you should not remove ideally. You should use ages, and for this you can use the travel take unmanaged save, something like that, because we are defining in this class header level only for the save sequences. And the transactional phase we have defined the separate classes. So when we have defined in my last class or last video, you can see the local types already defined all the five method for the save sequence: finalize, check before save, adjust numbers, save, cleanup, and cleanup finalize. Out of that, these 3 method is required us in this unmanaged scenario. We don't want to implement anything check before save and finalize, because finalize determination we done during the creation time. Check before save also we done during the creation time, that also we have modified the transactional buffer. And in the adjust number we need to define, because we have done the let numbering, save and cleanup method for the saving the data and cleaning up the transactional buffer. So let's start with the early numbering method, late numbering method, adjust numbering. In this method, if you see the interface of this method, we have the two changing parameter. One is the mapped or another one is reported. Basically, what we have to do in this mapped parameter, we have to send back the actual final key. If you see the derived type, we have the travel and booking separate fields for the travel and booking. For the travel, if you see, we have the final field as a travel and the temporary field as a travel ID. And the PID is the same, like we have CID and CID reference field during the transactional phase. This PID field will contain during the transactional phase the temporary ID which we have created, and that during the final save sequence we will modify this PID with our final key. But in this case we no need to require, in the draft scenario we will be needing, but at least we have to modify this travel ID and the temporary travel ID field. Temporary travel ID field will be the primarily what we can say, till now whatever the field we are used for the primary key field, that we will fill, and travel ID we will generate using the existing function module which we will call here, and that will give us the final key field. So which function module is already they are using? So in the, if you see this function group called the flight travel API, in this if you open all the APIs provided by this function group, there is one of the API called the adjust number. If you open this adjust number function module, basically this is giving us the, during the late numbering scenario, this is giving us the final number. If you open this adjust number, what they are doing, they just calling the internally adjust number method from the local classes, and if you go further inside, they are checking that your buffer2 should be initial. You already have data in your final buffer data, and that data should have some value. Once that data should have some value, that late numbering boundary they have defined as a, if you do F2, as a 900000000. So in this case, we have, when we created new travel ID, we have given new number, we have added +1 in this late numbering boundary and given the next number, and +1 temporarily we have given that we call the preliminary number. Sorry, I'm not able to pronounce. We can say the temporary number we have given to this late numbering boundary method. And now we are checking that newly created travel ID is greater than this particular late numbering boundary. Then only we are going further, and we are making sure that we are using only the late numbering, then only we go further. We are not using the mixed numbering thing. And once we came, so this kind of implementation we have already done in my manage scenario, where we are getting the next number from the number range object, and we are getting the next number, and that next number we have assigning to the travel ID, and the preliminary number, which temporary number, which we can say that we are filling here with from the existing travel ID, and the new travel ID which we have derived from the business we can say numbering object, that we are assigning as a final. So two field we are sending back using this function module. One is the preliminary number which is having the temporary ID, and one is the final number which is having the final ID. So this function module we can direct call in our case to get the data. So let me copy this function module, Control C, and call this function module in our adjust number method. Call function, and we can call this function module Control V, Control space you will do, Shift Enter, then it will give you the importing and exporting parameter. You can do Control Shift greater than to uncomment the changes, and you can define some tables over here, Control C, Control V, Control C, Control T, and you can do F2, or you can convert into the local variable this LT based on the naming convention. Once we have done change into the local variable, we have to declare obviously this local variable. You can do Control 1, declare all three local variables. It will declare for you. Basically, if you see the values you will get, there is a two value. One is the final key, one is the preliminary key. Preliminary key you will be having the temporary key, and final key you will be having the final travel ID. So now I have to, if you do have to, I have to map back those data in the mapped table. So what I will do, I will fill the mapped table. So first I will fill the mapped, control space you will do, travel. So I can use the value operator to construct the value, and in this I will loop through this travel table for the travel. For booking we can do a booking. If in our case we didn't define booking supplement, you can comment it out. It's not mandatory because it's an importing parameter. So in this case I will loop through I will use for loop ls travel. In this particular lt travel, again I will give one by one all the values. First I will give the temporary value. So temporary, if you see this F2, if you do here F2, I have to fill this temporarily ID, and second I have to fill the travel ID. So first I will fill this temporarily ID because it is a structure. Let me construct this structure again. Value operator I can use, and has control space you can do, and you can fill the travel ID should be control space. I want to get the travel ID from this control C. Preliminary temporarily ID I will pass, preliminary ID I will pass. So this will be preliminary, and travel ID I will pass. And second field I will pass the final key as well. If you see here, travel ID I have passed, something wrong. I have constructed this value, and I have passed from the ls travel ID. Okay, let me see what is the wrong, what is the error I am getting. Oh, I didn't put and, so let me put this button. Okay, now it is okay. So second field I will be passing the main travel ID. So that field will be the coming from the again ls travel, but this time it will come from the final key, and travel ID, which is the final travel ID I am passing. So like that I have mapped back the data. What was the temporarily ID which we have created during the when we were filling the buffer. Yeah, I showed you in last video as well, and this is the final travel ID which we are deriving using this function module. Let me do shift F1 and control F3. In the same way we can do for booking as well. You just have to do control alt arrow down button, but this time we have to do for the booking. As of now we are not using, but let me implement for booking as well, control space, because the save sequence, why to again come here and do those things. So instead of looping the travel, this time I will loop through booking table, control V, and here it will be the ls booking. And in the booking we have the two key field. One will be the travel ID, and another will be the booking ID, I think so. So that will come from the booking, control C, control V, and another will be the booking ID, and that we will fill from again control V, similarly ID, and the booking ID. Okay, and the same way we will fill the travel ID, control V from here, and booking ID we will fill from the control V, final booking ID. So this is how we will map back the derived newly final key travel ID and booking ID for the booking scenario, and for travel scenario will return the travel ID. Let me activate this one, control F3. But still it will not save the data in the database. To save the data in the database, we have to write the insert statement or update database table statement. For that also we have already APIs are defined to save the data in the database, that is called DMO flight travel save data. If you open this function module, basically what it is doing, it is calling that same demo class, and it's saving the data in the database. So for the travel, so what it is doing, it is making sure that temporarily buffer is cleared and the main buffer should have some value, and once it is have value, it is just going and updating the table. So these statement you can write during the late save sequence only. That is the that is the reason we are writing in the save method of the your RAP framework. So that is the reason, if you see here, so we have to call this particular method, not this one, in the save. So let me call that method. Let me copy that method from here, Control C. We will see this method code, both the method code again in the debug mode also, how it is working. No need to worry if you are not able to understand. So let me call that function again, call function, and you can Control V, Control space, Shift enter you will do. So it will just call this particular method, so no need to worry. And the same way we will call, we have the one API function module for the cleanup also. That basically, if you open that function module, let me open that, where is the function group? This is the function group, and we have the, for cleanup also we have one method, calculate price, create, delete, initialize, read, save, state book, and update. I think we should have this calculate price, adjust number, delete, initialize method we have to use. Control C. Let me open this one. Let me see what is this initialize method doing. It should clear the buffer basically. So it is clearing the main buffer. So we can use this method, initialize method, to clear the data from the buffer. So Control C, that should be called in your save sequence during the clear phase, not in this one. And you can do call function, Control V, Control space, Shift enter you will do. It's directly calling that method. Shift F1, Control F3, Control F3. So like that, we have implemented the first adjust number method, then save method, and then cleanup method. We have used entirely existing code available. I will explain what is the code is available during our runtime, but as of now you can see we have just implemented this all three methods. Now we will test our create operation. Is it really working now or not? Not only we'll test, we'll see how this adjust number, save, and cleanup method call during the save sequence. So let me go to the my service binding, select the root entity, and preview my application. I put the breakpoint, click on go button. Now create the new travel instance. Select some ID. I will do a space if I get something. Let me select some customer ID. Go. There is something wrong. Let me select again agency ID. So validation is happening, no need to worry. So let me enter some customer ID. Start date today. End date, let me choose any end date. Booking fee, let me choose 10 USD. And the travel status I can choose as a open and or new. Comment I can RAM first create, I can something like that, and click on create button. It will call first the create method, then later point of time it will call the save sequence. So since as of now we have put the breakpoint on the save sequence, so that is the reason first method it called the adjust number. If we would have put breakpoint on finalize and check before save, then the finalize will call first, then check before save, then the adjust number. But in this case I didn't put breakpoint, so that is the reason it called directly adjust number during the save sequence. In this save sequence I am calling the travel adjust number function module. How it is working, to see that, let me do F5. It's calling internally that class get instant adjust number method. Let me do F5. It's already have some instance returning the same instance. In this case we have already instance because it got created during the create method. So we already filled the data in the buffer during the create method trigger. That I didn't debug now because I already debugged that in my last video. Now it is calling the adjust number method. In the adjust number method, again it is instantiating the local class which we already instantiated. So let me do F5 and calling the adjust number method of the local class. It is making sure that your temporary buffer should not have any value and your main buffer should have some value. It's not initial means it should have some value, and once it have some value, it is making sure if travel ID which you have created, you have temporarily you have generated the travel ID, or we can say preliminary you have generated the travel ID. In our case, the value of that travel ID is 9001, which we are deriving for each travel ID after the, not 9001, 9000001, and which we are deriving each time for new travel instant. It become 2, 3 and onwards based on how many travel ID you are creating in one go. If you are calling this BO from the any program, in this case, since we are calling from front end, we are creating one only at a time. So this number, if it is greater than this number, then this is the late numbering, and the number of entries in this empty create buffer is the number of entries whatever it is available in the in this particular buffer table. That travel ID, maximum travel ID, if it is less than this particular value, that means you are not using the late numbering, you are using the early numbering. So in our case we are using late numbering, so that is the reason this late numbering flag is ABAP true. In some cases we want to make sure this should not be equal to this. Either we have to use late numbering or we have to use the early numbering. If they have used a mixed kind of thing, then this method is not appropriate from them. That is the reason they are raising the assert statement, and it will give us the dump if you are not following this method. So that is good. In our scenario we are using the late numbering scenario. So this method and creation of the number object and calling that number object we have done in my managed scenario. The same code is written, no need to worry, just they are getting the in this case we need only one next number, so they are getting the quantity we need 1 from this numbering object, and number range is 0, 1, and it is returning us the key next number after the adding, and the return code is blank because there is no error, and return quantity will be 1. And we want to make sure the returned quantity and the we requested quantity both should be similar, then only we will go further. That also I have explained in my managed scenario. And we want the latest number whichever we got, we want to deduct again, and we want to get the current number which is available in the database. That will be LB travel 4138, and we will loop through this empty buffer table, and one by one we are getting the next number 4139, and that we are assigning to this final word. If you see the RT travel mapping, currently it is blank. Now it got assigned here. For this preliminary ID we have 4139, newly created key. So this is how we will, and they have finally modified this buffer table. In this one empty create buffer table they have modified, and they modified basically not entire table, they just modified the primary key. Once you define the primary key, same thing they are doing for booking and booking supplement also, but in our case we currently created on the travel only. We will get this data in LT travel mapping. So you can see we got for this preliminary key we got the 4139 final key, which will be we gonna save in the database, and that we have mapped back to my mapped travel. So you can see PID is blank, we don't need as of in this point of time PID. PID is the temporarily ID which is used like CID and CID reference we have, same way we have the PID. Until and unless you don't have the final travel ID, in the draft scenario we use the PID. It will be temporarily save the data in the draft table. That will also we will discuss then when we come across the draft scenario. But same way they did for the booking as well. And let me do F8. It will call next method save. You can see it is called the save method got called. Let me do F5. In the save method they are doing same thing. They just saving the data in the, they are making sure your temporary buffer should not have a value and your main buffer or transactional buffer should have some value. They are making sure the number of records should be less than this LT numbering boundary, and everything once they make sure, then whatever the data available from the create buffer, they are inserting the data from table, updating and deleting. But even you have executed this statement, if you see this 4139 table in demo travel table, if you open this one and if you try to see the if you try to see the 4139, in that case the still data will be not available. I'm just making sure because the commit work didn't happen. Even you executed the travel save statement, the commit work didn't happen. Commit will happen after the save method, and once the save method is triggered, commit work will happen. Then only for 4139 you can see in the table. Once everything is done, we are cleaning up the data. Basically it is again calling that transactional buffer and local class, and it's initializing means it's clearing your buffer tables. And once everything is done, you will do F8 and you will come to the terminated, you will come to your preview. Ideally it should create the new travel ID. Let me do F8. Let me go to ABAP perspective. Something went wrong, I think so. Why it didn't create it? Debugger got triggered. Let me go to ABAP perspective. Let me go to the travel table. Let me do F8 here. Latest one 4139 is there or not? Let me see. I think 4139 got created, but it didn't return to the front end. Something wrong. Inspect. So there is something wrong. Let me do one thing. I think it didn't return the return back the results. So let me refresh it. Okay, let me come back. Anyway, 4139 got created. If you go click on go button and descending order, if you go, you can see 4139 is created. But let me see why it didn't come back. Let me create one more quickly. This time I will not debug. I will deactivate the debugger. You can see, keep all breakpoint, and I will do F4. 7002 customer ID I will pass something, date I will pass something, and date should be greater than. So let me pass 10 USD. I will pass USD. Let me pass the comment new RAM, something I want to pass. Travel is open new. Let me create it. It got created, you know. I think we debugged for more time, so the connection got lost. Now you can see it is creating successfully. And if you come back and refresh the data, you can see 440 is correct created. And if you see in the database also, if you refresh, 4140 got created. So like that, once we implement the save sequence, then this create operation work smoothly. Again, I came to the slides to explain how the create operation work during the transactional phase. We discussed the save sequence, but before save sequence, the transactional phase will trigger. Transactional phase save the data in the buffer, and the save sequence pick up the data from the buffer and save in the database. During the transactional phase, the create operation will trigger like this. As soon as you click on create button, then first all this transactional create thing will trigger. It will save data in transactional buffer, and then the save sequence will trigger. Both transactional phase and save sequence are internally tightly coupled, so we are not able to differentiate. As a front end guy, when I'm working, I click create, data is saved. I'm thinking like directly it's saved on the database, but it's not that. It's first save the data in the database buffer, then it will pick up the data from database buffer, and then it will save in the save sequence. So first we will discuss during the transactional phase which all are the method will trigger. So first method is I shown you in the debug mode in the last video also. The first will trigger the authorization check. Here you can define any authorization. Second, it will trigger if you define any global feature control, that will trigger. Feature control, we can enable and disable any operation using the feature control that I already explained in detail in my feature control video. And the next thing, it will do the pre-check at the projection layer. So if you have defined, we can define the, as I told you in last video also, or in this video also, we can define the behavior pool at the projection layer as well. In the projection layer, anything you define in the pre-check why we use, we want to make sure a method that is called before the modify request is executed on the transactional buffer to prevent the unwanted changes from reaching to the application buffer. Something user entered which is unwanted, and we don't want that should go to the transactional buffer. So we want to validate that thing. So that validation we do in the pre-check. You can do that pre-check at the projection layer as well, and you can do that pre-check at the interface layer. If you did at the projection layer, then this method will be called at the projection layer. Method will be called first, then it will call the augmentations. So augmentation, again, it is used when something incoming request is coming and we want to modify something, and then we want to send to the transactional buffer. There it will use the augmentation. It is possible to modify the incoming request. Something, for example, user entered 2 instead of 2, I want to send save. For example, we have open, the flight status is open and rejected, for example 2. Instead of open and rejected, I want to send back 1 and 2. I want to modify some data and then I want to send. So those things we can do in the augmentation. Incoming request before going to the transactional buffer or before going to the next step during the modification, I want to modify that and then I want to set to the transactional buffer. Those things, augmentation kind of things, we can do in this particular method. Till now we didn't create it, neither we created the pre-check nor we created the augmentation. If in future video, if I feel I want to explain, then I will create and show you. But this is the sequence how it is methods are called. Then if you define any pre-check in your interface level, that will be called, and after these all 5 method, the trigger create will be called after this all the 5 method. So in unmanaged scenario and managed scenario, both the places you can define those all 5 methods. When you call the create trigger method, it will in unmanaged scenario directly call the modify method for create, which we have created in my last video. That will be called and everything will be done, and data will be saved to the transactional buffer. In managed scenario, the manage create will be called, and if you define the early numbering, then the early numbering method will be called, and if you have some determination which is during the transactional phase you want to do, those determination will be called. Those all things will be called during this create method or during the initial transactional phase of the create operation. So these all are the method will be called in the managed scenario. The managed scenario, you can see the determination. This determination is different. As when I explain the determination can be called during the transactional phase also and during the save sequence also. If something you define during the transactional phase, those determination will be called. But in this case, in unmanaged scenario, whatever you are doing, this all the things, if you want to do early numbering also, that also you have to do in the create only. If you want to do the determination also, that also you have to do in the create method. One method is there, you can do whatever you want in the create method. In managed scenario, since the framework is doing so, SAP or framework giving you advantage here that you can do the early numbering in separate method if you want, or if you want to do some determination as per your convenience, that also you can do. Once everything is done, this method is called what we can say save sequence will be called. In the save sequence, there is 2 cases. Either you are calling this particular business object from other business object or other report, then it will just call the commit work and do the cleanup if something goes wrong. In the OData thing, when we are doing the interacting through the Fiori or web application, that time it will do, it will call the save sequence. And save sequence, how it will be called, those finalize will be called, method will be called, and the check before save, adjust number, save modified, clean method, these method will be called here during the save sequence. Once everything is done, then again it will call the get entity set method and get the data back and display into front end, whatever it is called created. So this is how the create operation called during that transactional phase. And save sequence, we already saw how it is called. One more thing you have noticed, that even we didn't define the read method. So you can see the read, and we don't have any option in the behavior definition. We can define we are doing the read, but we have still the methods in the behavior pool, read and read by association. Even we didn't write any single line of code to read the data from the database, still when we click on go button, we are getting the data. How it is happening, that we will discuss in next video. So before going to that video, please like this video, share these videos with others as well. With that, thank you and happy learning.